بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. The Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith, which is number 224 of the provisions for the seekers, al-Talibin, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من طلب العلم ليجاري به العلماء أو ليماري به السفهاء أو يصرف به وجوه الناس إليه أدخله الله النار. Whoever seeks sacred knowledge to vie with scholars, compete with scholars, argue with fools, or capture public notice, Allah will enter him into the hellfire. Hadith related both by Imam Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah. This is obviously one of the calamities of knowledge as such. Meaning a person is doing a very sacred act, which is to go and study sacred knowledge. The intention is what's at stake here. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about the importance of intention. Most of the authors, or many of the authors, like Imam Nawawi, Imam Bukhari, they will bring the niyyah hadith first. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. Because ikhlas is so important. Especially if it's not a mundane task that you're doing. You're doing such a sacred task, such a noble task of studying some knowledge. And when we say studying knowledge, it doesn't have to be a formal study of knowledge where you give up everything and you go and study. Or that you're attending a particular type of class on a regular basis. This could also be when you're sitting in a lecture, for example. And you're sitting in a lecture and you have some polemical problem with somebody else. And the person who's speaking right now, the one who's giving the speech or the scholar who you're listening to, he comes with a very relevant point that seems to support what you are trying to prove against somebody else. So right then you start thinking, oh, I can use this. Right? You don't want to study it for that knowledge. The intention should be that we study this knowledge for ourselves first. You also don't want to study knowledge. I mean, this happens with probably people who give talks and who give speeches and who may be administrators of certain da'wah projects and who are into da'wah, where they read something and the first thing that they actually think is that, oh, this is such a beautiful point. This will create a great impact in my speech. Or this will be such an interesting point to mention to people. So we don't want to do that. When we study, we should be the first recipients of that knowledge. It should benefit us first. And the way to make it benefit us first is to actually feel that we want to benefit from it first. So if it's an interesting point, we must reflect on it first. And then, if we've reflected on it, we've then absorbed it, we've made it ours, it will probably come out in a much more powerful way if you're a speaker, or if you're a da'i, an inviter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in some form or the other. It'll probably come out in a much more impactful way, because it'll be coming out of the heart. Because we've reflected over it. We've actually made it ours. We've not just taken it as some raw data just to present. It's not statistics that we're just presenting. It's actually something that we have now taken, we've adopted, we've imbibed within ourselves, and now when we speak, it's going to be fully clothed in our own persuasion, inshaAllah. So the Prophet ﷺ is speaking about three things that when we're seeking knowledge, it should not be to vie with scholars. Now again, this is some ignorant person wants to go and doesn't like a particular scholar, so they go and they research something just so that they can put a scholar down for absolutely no purpose whatsoever, just as a polemic, just as an argument. And this happens sometimes, especially with people who have a certain type of argumentative nature within their hearts. If a person has an argumentative nature, argumentative person, what they will be thinking about is, how can I get one over the other person? So everything they're studying is also looking for ammunition. And that's the problem with disputes. Because what it does is that even when you're in salat, it spoils your prayer. Because if you see the other person just before the salat, the shaitan, who's always wanting to distract us in salat anyway, will start to make us feel that, oh, I can use this evidence against him. He said this last time, but it should be this way. We justify so many things in our mind, even if we're true. If you look at Imam Shafi'i, he says that whenever I've had a discussion with someone, an argument about something, a discussion of an ilmi nature, a discussion of a nature to do with academics, in terms of a particular mas'ala, a particular problem, particular issue, a fiqhi issue, my dua is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the haqq, the truth, come onto the tongue of the other person. That I don't mind being the one told that I made a mistake, and for me to correct myself. And his whole focus was that the haqq be uplifted, and the haqq is what prevail, and that the other person not be ashamed and put down. I mean, that's serious ikhlas. That's sincerity to its, that's sincerity to a very high level. But here the Prophet ﷺ is really warning us against these wrong intentions that could creep in our mind if we don't even have these intentions at the outset. That's not what we embarked on our knowledge for. But then these things come in because we may have run into an argument with someone. And it may have been a foolish argument. Someone may have, a foolish person may have accosted us. Maybe some uncle in our family, a cousin or somebody. And now because they're not convinced about religiosity as much as we are, or as much as you are, for example. So then they take you to task for something. Now you're going there looking for something to get back at him from. Now you have to judge the situation. Is it worth it or not? Is this something they're going to be convinced by or not? I could give him all the evidences. Will he listen or not? So this knowledge is so valuable that we should not diminish it by studying it to just vie with a scholar, argue with fools. And that's what I mean. You've got this person, this old friend, this old person you knew. Now you've just changed your life and they want to make you feel that you're just trying to be over pious or something. So you go and waste your time in looking for a lot more evidences, whereas it's not going to really work with them. You'd rather go and study something for yourself just to improve yourself in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or capture public notice. This is where you're doing it just to attract people to yourself. Just so that they may call you a great scholar, a very good speaker. Right? And that's another malady. That's another problem that we have to beware of. And as you can see from this is that the more knowledgeable you become, the more the possibility of these things coming up. Because when you get more knowledge, then you might think that a particular scholar, what he's saying is wrong. So then you'll go and just particularly to overcome the person, you might go and study that much more, or that particular topic. Or a fool. Right? And likewise to capture public notice. So personally, the way I look at this is, I think this probably becomes more of a challenge the more knowledge you study. That's why it's not sufficient only to have a good intention at the outset. It's a very good thing to start with that, but it's also very important that we keep reminding ourselves, probably before every seating we have of study, every time we sit down to read something, to learn something, to read our kitabs and our books and so on. Allah will enter them into the hellfire because they're wasting their time. Allah has given them such a resource. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din." Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good with, then He gives them deep understanding in the faith. Now if we're to use that knowledge in the wrong way, to do the wrong thing with, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see that we're not valuing the knowledge. We're not doing it for the right thing. One mustn't understand from this that you can't do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. Yes, if there is a batil and if there is a misunderstanding, then there must be a way to correct that. And it's ulama who will correct other ulama. Not the general folk can't do it as much, although sometimes that happens as well, and that's a possibility. So we're not trying to say that we should exclude all of that. It's just that intention needs to be correct in that.